Hi, everyone. I think we're live. Many of you know me. I'm Mac Hamilton. I'm the advocacy director at WAND. It looks like we have folks trickling in. So I'm going to do a little bit of a slow start to allow everyone time to, grab a glass of water or whatever they need to do in between sessions. Um, and I see Diane in the room and just wanted to say a big thank you for your wonderful talk just now. Really glad to have you here and have you lobbying with us today. And I see Representative Waite in the room. Wonderful. Hopefully we get a few others, but we are recording this session for anyone who is not able to make it. So I'll just go ahead and get started. So this is our virtual lobbying 101 session. If you have any questions that come up throughout the session, I think many of you know by now how to use the Q&A function on the side of your screen. You can feel free to type in a question there if anything comes up. And also at the end of the session, I'll be able to bring some of you on screen if you want to ask any questions in real time. So you should see kind of at the bottom where the emojis are on the other side, there's a little raise hand button. So if you click that raise hand button, I can bring you onto the screen during the Q&A session. So that's another option that we have here. So many of you have lobbied before. Some of this is going to be familiar. It's just tweaked a little bit in the virtual world that we're living in. But some of you might be new to lobbying. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll feel pretty comfortable with what a virtual lobby meeting looks like, the types of issues that we'll be discussing, and how you can prep for your meetings before tomorrow. Let me hit next. Yes, so here's what we'll get into in this training before our Q&A. So the first one is planning for your meeting. I'll talk to you a little bit about what to expect and how to do some preparations. And most of you have received an email from me by now. Diane is the exception because we have a couple of tweaks with our Georgia offices. But most of you have heard from me that we're in the process of setting up your meetings. We have actually most of them set up by now. A lot of responses have come in this morning. So after this training in the afternoon, I'll follow up with each of you by email with your schedule for tomorrow, the time, who you'll be meeting with, and the Zoom link to join. And you can feel free to be in touch with me with any questions about those meetings. So yes, we'll be talking about logistics first. Step 2 here is inside your meeting. So step by step, what a meeting looks like. We also have a resource on this if you'd like to refer to it on our Lobby Day page on the Juno platform. So feel free to download that PDF. It's a 2-page document that just suggests a layout for planning your meeting. We have 4 asks, which I'll talk a little bit about. I don't want to go into too much detail because our Lobby Day talking points document has a whole lot of detail for you to read through at your leisure. But really for each office, you'll probably want to choose 1 or 2 of these to zoom into in your meeting, depending on stances that your legislator has taken in the past. If they've already taken an action to end the 1033 program, you can just thank them for that, and that doesn't have to be your ask. You could focus instead on, for example, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. So that'll vary a little bit from member to member. And on our talking points document, we have linked to some key votes or the congress.gov page for pieces of legislation. So you can see if they voted with us on an issue recently, you can just thank them. Or if they're already a co-sponsor of one of our pieces of legislation, you don't need to make a big ask to them necessarily. And then step 3 is extremely fast. It's after your meeting. So everything we're doing in lobby day is in service of helping you build a long-term relationship with your members of Congress. So following up is extremely important. We'll put together a sample email for you to send. We'll get that out to you probably Thursday morning, so that you can follow up with them right away while the meeting is fresh in their minds. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. Yes. So as I mentioned, relationship building is really key. So you know, of course, who your federal representatives and senators are, but I think that this can be a more targeted question, as in, what are their positions? How have they voted on pieces of legislation that you care about? How do their positions compare with yours? Are they on the same page on some of these? Are they a really, progressive member who's leading the charge on some of these issues? Diane, I'm sorry to keep picking on you, but for example, Representative Hank Johnson has been the leader on ending the 1033 program for many years. So for that, he's a really great example of someone who really gets these issues. Whereas, if you're meeting with, I don't know, I think we have some Maine folks lobbying today with Susan Collins. She might be a tougher office where you have to kind of look at where the common ground is and try to find a couple of issues where you can find common ground. And then, yeah, just think about where the overlap is. I think we can all appreciate that we should have a better use of our tax dollars, right? And so if you bring it back to making sure that Americans' tax dollars are going to the best use for the American people, that's often a way to talk to people across the aisle about our issues. So planning for your meeting, who to bring, where to go, who to meet with, and what to say. So who to bring, if you're able to bring fellow legislators, if you're able to bring, activists or community leaders who also care about these issues, you are welcome to. You'll soon have the information on the meetings, and we would welcome you to share that if you have anyone who would like to join your meeting who's also from your state or your district. The where to go, most of these are going to be Zoom meetings that we will set up for you. If you are the only person from your state lobbying, you will have at least one WAND or WIL staff member with you in your meeting. And so we'll be able to help facilitate the technology. You'll just want to make sure that your technology is working well in advance of your meeting. So for each of our meetings, we'll plan to open the virtual room at least 10 or 15 minutes before the meeting. We find that that's really useful so that you can touch base with whoever's going to be in the meeting with you. You can get to know each other if you haven't worked together before. You can talk a little bit about how you'd like to see the flow of the meeting go, who will speak first, second, third, depending on who's in the room. You can make sure your tech is working properly. We really recommend, whenever possible, being on a laptop in a stable space. You don't want backlighting if possible. So as you'll see, I have my window closed here. You can see me a lot better when my curtain is closed. So make sure that there's not bright sunlight behind you. It'll make sure that that your camera's clearer. You'll want to make sure your audio is working and that your internet is up to snuff as well. And meeting about 10 or 15 minutes beforehand can help you make sure that all of your technology is working properly before the staff member or member of Congress in some cases pops into your meeting. And then I think the last thing to note here is that it's really helpful to have written down somewhere or, in your email tab, the call-in phone number in case anything goes wrong. So Zoom always has an option to join by phone if you need to. So I would just note down that number in case, for example, there's an internet outage and you need to call in at some point during your meeting. So that's just a contingency plan. Who you're going to meet with. For most of you, it's going to be a military advisor or a foreign policy advisor in the office of your member of Congress. We do have a couple of meetings where the member themselves is able to join for, either the whole meeting, or they're likely to be able to hop in, at some point during the meeting based on for example, I think Senator Leahy has a hearing that he's chairing right before his meeting with Vermont legislators, but he's hoping to come in at the end. So just so you're aware of who you might be meeting with. And then what to say we will cover in our next section. So I've mentioned some of this: be early, be in a stable place if possible, noting the dial-in number, etc. And here's how you prep as well. So deciding your asks, we have several that we'll share with you, but honestly, it's your meeting. So, we want you to bring up issues that really matter to you. We will certainly have suggestions for what the top asks might be for particular offices based off of what they've worked on in the past. For example, if you're a legislator from Utah, we would really like Senators Romney and Lee to take the lead on the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. Utah is a downwind state, and not everyone who has lived downwind of nuclear testing has received compensation. If you attended our session with Mary Dixon and Tina Cordova last week, Mary's a downwinder from Utah, and she spoke, who's not covered by RECA, and she spoke really powerfully about what that compensation would mean to her. However, it's up to you to decide your asks and the things that really matter to you. So if you have an issue that's not on our list, but you really want to bring it up, we welcome you to do that. Doing your research. So we've tried to help you out here as well on our Lobby Day landing page, particularly in our talking points document. We've tried to share some facts about the issues. If you'd like to highlight one or two of those facts to bring up in your meeting, that can be really helpful. Offices really like to have statistics shared on various issues as they weigh their options on them. And it's really important for you to, as much as possible, bring it back to your constituents, your shared constituents in many cases. Why does this matter to the folks on the ground in your state and in your community? And then knowing where your legislator stands on these issues is really important, which is why we've put key votes in that document too. So it's helpful for you to come into that meeting with a little bit of research on what they've done in the past on these issues. So just as a suggestion for how you might like to structure your meeting, this is usually the method that I take, is starting with an introduction, saying, "Hi, my name is Mac. I'm the advocacy director at Women's Action for New Directions. We're an organization that was founded at the height of the Cold War in order to prevent nuclear catastrophe from occurring. And now we work on issues related to demilitarizing our society, both at home in the United States and demilitarizing our approaches to foreign policy." And then you'll want to thank the legislator for actions that they've taken on related issues. So you can bring in your research there as well. So if, for example, they voted in favor in the House NDAA of reeling in the 1033 program and taking military weapons off our streets, you can thank the staffer right then and there. And it's likely that that staffer advised the member on how to vote on that issue. And so it's really meaningful for them to get that thank you from you. You should ask them how familiar they are with the issues you plan to discuss. So if you've decided that RICA or voting rights are, the issues that you'd like to cover. You can say, is this an issue that you've worked on in the office in the past? And that'll help you decide how much detail to go into. Are they someone who really hasn't dealt with the issue before and they need more background? Or are they someone who helped draft the legislation? Asking that question up front can help your conversation flow a little bit better. The third bit, sharing why you and your constituents care about these issues. I know you can all speak really well to those issues. Then you'll want to share some facts that drive the point home. We've prepared some. I know that you all have some facts on hand that you'd like to share too. So, maybe note 2 or 3 facts that you'd like to share about the issues that you plan to discuss. And then in the end, you'll want to ask where the legislator is on the issue. Have you spoken to Senator Warren about this issue before? Do you know where she stands on this issue? Do you think that she would be willing to co-sponsor this legislation? You want to have that be a part of the frank discussion. And you don't want any surprises, and you want to always make sure that it goes back to the actual ask. And this is easier in staffer meetings. Staffers are often looking for, what's the legislation number so I can follow up on this after the meeting. If the member themselves is in your meeting, it's sometimes harder to make a direct ask, but we trust you to do your best to steer the conversation in that direction. And then in the end, if there's time, you can ask them if there are any questions that they have about your asks that you can help address. It's okay if you don't have the answers. You can note them down and then be in touch with myself or another member of Wand Will's staff. And we can be sure to help you follow up with any answers to questions that they may have asked in your meeting. It's actually a good opportunity and excuse to follow up with them if they have any questions. And then thank them for their time, and then you can sign off. So here's our core asks. You should know these pretty well by now. And on our Lobby Day landing page, you'll see these in kind of the simplest of terms in our Lobby Day leave behind. And in that leave behind, we would welcome you to share either the direct link to it, or I think that you can upload a document in the Zoom chat box. So you'd be welcome to share that leave behind in the Zoom chat box during your meeting. You can also send it in your follow-up email as an attachment to the office. But these are our 4 key issues that I'll just try to speed through really quickly since you have additional materials on them. So cutting the Pentagon budget. This is one of the graphics that we've put into our leave behind. As you can see, there have been absolutely massive increases in our military spending over time. And I think that context is pretty important to share. When is enough enough? Can we ever get back to our spending levels, in the 60s and 70s? You would think that, at the height of the Vietnam War might have been the time where we spent the most on the Pentagon budget. That's really not the case. We've continued spending precious dollars that we need elsewhere, we need here at home, as we've been discussing throughout the month. And we're spending that largely on military contractors, not on our service members, not on our veterans. We're spending it on weapons that hopefully we'll never have to use. And so it's up to you to really make that case to your federal legislators. Another stark image here that's in our leave behind, we've shared the 2019 budget because the 2020 budget looks quite a bit different because of the direct COVID payments. But this is what a normal, unfortunately normal, US discretionary spending budget looks like, with our military at about 53% of our budget. And everyone else fighting for the scraps that are left behind from our military spending. And to mention as well, of course, it's Civil Rights Week, and we have heard a lot about the importance of connecting our civil rights at home to our foreign policy. Representative Barbara Lee's legislation on the third Reconstruction, which is in the House only at the moment, but it's gaining momentum. This legislation was really led by the Poor People's Campaign, one of our important partners in this space. And it's really looking to address poverty and low wages from the bottom up. And as we know, Barbara Lee knows these issues very well. The legislation talks a lot about refocusing away from violent approaches to both our domestic and foreign policy and towards meeting human needs at home. So we would love for you to bring that up in your meetings with House offices in particular. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, if you were unable to attend the brilliant session that Samantha Blake led with Tina Cordova and Mary Dixon last week on this issue, we would welcome you to view that recording. They speak very powerfully about what it would mean to be compensated for the harm caused by U.S. nuclear testing, particularly between 1945 and 1962. I'll mention as well that uranium workers were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation, and the current Compensation Act that's been in place since 1990 only covers uranium workers who were mining up until 1971. But uranium mining didn't end until the 1980s in terms of developing our nuclear arsenal. So there are thousands of people who were involved in mining uranium and processing uranium who have never received compensation from working in the mines without any protective material. And as we know from wearing masks every day, and how that feels that makes us protected from disease, at the very least, that's what these uranium workers who were in mines, eating food in the mines, being covered with uranium excess in their clothing that they washed alongside their family's clothing. This the US government knew that there was more that we could be doing to protect these workers that we just didn't do. So this legislation seeks to extend and expand compensation for both downwinders and uranium workers, and then select service members as well who were involved in nuclear testing on test sites. So the bill numbers are up here, and they're also in our lobby day materials. You can check if your members have co-sponsored yet, but this is a really important issue to us. And we've talked a little bit throughout the day today about issues with domestic militarism. Our core focus is on ending the 1033 program, which is the program by which the Pentagon is able to transfer weapons of war to local police departments at low or no cost. Police departments only pay for shipping and storage of these items. And I'll note here, we have a couple of facts here to note. We know that when law enforcement agencies are receiving more military equipment, that the number of civilians killed by police increases. And so we have one study that's noted an increase of civilian deaths by 129% when a department is receiving transfers from the Pentagon of weaponry. And we also know that a lot of these weapons are lost or stolen, and that it's quite easy for law enforcement agencies to get these weapons, right? So the Government Accountability Office, a few years ago, I think this was in 2012, put in a request from a fake police department and was able to receive $1.2 million in controlled military items. even if we are to have a program like this, which we should not, there just are not the checks to make sure that it's being run safely. So we're looking to shut down this program. Unfortunately, we recently had a vote on this in the House National Defense Authorization Act, where 22 Democrats voted against reining in the 1033 program. And to really bring that home, they voted against this measure that most of them, except one or two, had earlier voted for in passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So we've also included the George Floyd Act in our Lobby Day talking points document, so you can see how your legislator voted both on the House NDAA vote and on the George Floyd Justice and Policing vote. And then, of course, our last ask is around strengthening US democracy and voting rights. There's a few pieces of legislation. You're probably aware of the House legislation, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act in particular. But there's a new Senate bill as of last month called the Freedom to Vote Act. There previously had not been a Senate companion. And so a few of the things that this bill would do are listed on the screen, making Election Day a public holiday, requiring same-day registration at polling places, and then ensuring early voting in federal elections. So we're supporting this legislation too. And really, we think that this is an underpinning of everything else that we're trying to do. Without a strong democracy and without voting rights for every person, we're unable to advocate on any of the other issues that we care so deeply about. So those are our 4 issues. And then you'll wrap up your meeting. And this is just kind of a very basic follow-up email. We'll help you with a template for a follow-up email after your meetings, as I mentioned. But I will just close here because I want to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. Okay, so I'm going to stop screen sharing here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand. If you toggle over the bottom of the screen where you see my video, there should be a raise hand button. So I'd welcome you to open that. And thanks to Corey for sharing our resource link earlier as well. I'm gonna pop that back in there in case anyone joined the room late. That's our resource tab with all of our Lobby Day materials. I'm gonna wait a couple of minutes to see if there's any questions, and then I'll get back to emailing you all about exactly when your meetings are. But if you have any questions about that before I send those emails, I'm also happy to answer them. I should mention too, while we're all here together, that tomorrow we will have Wand Will staff available all day in case you have any tech issues or if you have any questions about lobbying. We'll be running a Lobby Day help desk from 9 to 5. And I'm going to put that link in there. It's also in your schedule on Juno. So if you have a tough time finding it, you can go back to your schedule, but the link's right there, and I'll make sure to include that in my next email to you all too with your confirmations of your Lobby Day meetings. All right, maybe I covered everything really well. I love to hear that. If you have any questions that come up, I think most of you have my email address. I'm very happy to field questions whenever they come up as you're prepping for your meetings. So please feel free to drop me an email. I'll also drop my phone number in the chat in case you have any issues day of, and you should have that in my email signature too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mac. Just thanking everyone for being here. And thank you, Diane, again, for the great interview earlier, and to Representative Cannon. I know she's not on, but I just want to say thanks anyway. And thank you for a great rundown of Lobby Day, Mac. Those meetings are filling up, so I know you've got your work cut out for you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it and to being in some of these meetings, and Rakia will be with you in some of them too. So really looking forward to tomorrow. Yeah, get some rest and do some research before then.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you again, Mac.
Bye, everyone.